Hey everyone, it's Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here and you love simple, delicious vegan recipes, make sure to hit that little subscribe button for more. Today I am showing you some more delicious date night recipe ideas. I've already done at least one other video on the channel like this, but with Valentine's Day rolling around, I thought it would be a good chance to remind you that you can totally make your date night dinners plant-based and have them be satisfying and delicious. So in this video, we have two recipes that have more of like a heartier plant-based swap for meat as the main, like some steak and potatoes, and then some yummy chicken piccata, which if you haven't had before, is so delicious. And then we're also keeping things naturally plant-based with a really creamy and delicious mushroom risotto. So all the full recipes will be linked below as always, but now I'll show you how to make them. First up, we are making our steak and potatoes, or portobello mushroom steaks with peppercorn sauce and the most delicious Dijon mustard potatoes. But first we'll start with the portobello mushroom steaks. We're going to be making a marinade. Excuse my mess. I clearly do not have very good aim, but we're going to start by putting some red wine and tamari in a small jar, along with some smoked paprika and vegan Worcestershire sauce, which adds a little bit more depth of flavor, but if you can't find it, you can leave it out. You're going to shake that up until it's emulsified, and then we're taking some portobello mushroom caps, just remove the stems, and you can place them in a bag, or you can also do this in a shallow dish, which when I tested this recipe again, I kind of found out worked a little better, but you do whatever works best for you. But put the mushrooms in the bag or your dish and just pour the marinade on top, and you want to let these sit for a few minutes so they absorb the marinade. So we'll just set these aside, and then in the meantime we'll start the prep on our garlic Dijon potatoes. I am using fingerling potatoes for this recipe, but you can use any gold potato you would like. You just want to cut them small enough. So here I'm cutting the fingerling potatoes in half, but with gold potatoes you might want to quarter them or even cut them into smaller wedges as well. Now for our marinade slash dressing, I guess, we're combining some olive oil with some Dijon mustard and lots of fresh garlic. You're going to mix that together until it's kind of emulsified. It's not going to become totally emulsified, but just do your best, and then toss the potatoes in and give it a good stir. I know the combination of mustard and baked potatoes may sound odd, but trust me, it is so good. I've even made this with yellow mustard when I didn't have Dijon, and it was just as delicious. If you are a mustard lover or a garlic lover, you're gonna love these. So after you mix the potatoes, just season with salt and pepper to taste. My recommendation is use a little bit more salt than you need, because I find that a lot of people tend to undersalt their roasted veggies and then the flavor is not as great. We're going to transfer them to a baking sheet, and then we'll pop those in the oven, and now we'll cook our mushroom steaks. So as you can see here, I actually like to spoon a little bit of the marinade into the mushroom cap to have them act as sort of a bowl, and I place them with their top side down first. I do like to sear these in a cast iron because I find it gets a better color, and you can press down on the mushrooms to really flatten them more and infuse them with more flavor. But you can also do this in a non-stick or stainless steel pan if you want. The browning just doesn't occur as faster as well. So we're going to cook these for a few minutes and then use tongs to flip them over. And then as you can see, the liquid that I stored in the mushroom caps comes into the pan, which adds some steaminess, and you're also just going to dump the rest of the marinade in there and continue to cook these until they are nice and golden, and they get an almost glossy finish on them because of the little bit of sweetness in the Worcestershire sauce, and the red wine really adds some nice color and flavor. I will say with a cast iron pan, just make sure not to overcook them. It's harder to tell if something's burning in a cast iron pan, but they should still get some nice color on them. So you're going to take your mushrooms out of the pan and just set those aside, and now we're going to make a peppercorn pan sauce. A pan sauce is traditionally made with the drippings from leftover meat, but obviously we're making a vegan version of that. First up, you're going to crush some black peppercorns until they're pretty finely ground. You can also do this ahead of time for the sake of time, you know, before you cook the mushrooms, because you don't want the stuff in the bottom of the pan to completely burn. But you're going to add some more oil to the pan and then toss in those black peppercorns along with some fresh garlic, and saute this for a little bit until the garlic is nice and fragrant and the peppercorns bloom, and also try to scrape some of the extra things off the bottom of the pan, which is going to add more flavor to our dish. Then we're going to deglaze the pan with brandy. You could also use more red wine if you don't want to buy two types of alcohol, but brandy or cognac is typical in a peppercorn steak sauce. And then we're going to add in some vegan beef flavored broth. You could use vegetable broth as well. Bring that to a simmer and then add in some full fat oat milk or coconut milk, or if you have an unsweetened vegan creamer at the store near you, you can use that too. You just want to make the sauce a little bit creamy. So you're going to stir all of this in and then bring it to a simmer and then let it reduce for a little bit. If you want to thicken the sauce, you can also use some arrowroot powder or cornstarch, but I left my sauce as is. So then at about this time, our potatoes should be done. They are going to smell amazing and have some nice crispy bits and be golden and delicious. You can sprinkle them with some parsley for a little bit of extra pizzazz. And then everything is pretty much ready to plate and enjoy. So I put our glossy peppercorn steak on the plate, top it with some potatoes, and then obviously we can't forget our pan sauce. This makes a good amount of pan sauce, so even if you wanted to put some on your potatoes or you had some roasted veggies on the side, you could totally serve this with that as well. But I love these mushroom steaks. They're still hearty and they're a great alternative to steak. If you wanted this meal to have more plant-based protein, you could serve it with some crispy tofu or something as well. Or you could also make this vegan chicken piccata, which has a protein base as a substitute for our chicken. So I've tested this using both vegan chicken fillets and super firm tofu. So I'll show you how to make it using each one. And it really is delicious both ways, just depends on your preference. So for the tofu, you want to use super firm tofu, not extra firm. The super firm is pre-pressed and vacuum sealed. You're going to cut it into 4 even, let's say, fillets. You want them to be relatively thin because chicken piccata is usually pounded. And because this tofu isn't seasoned, you're going to sprinkle both sides with salt and pepper to add some flavor to it, just to make things taste a little more delicious. But with the store-bought vegan chicken, it's usually pre-seasoned and there's already salt on it, so I would skip this step if you're using that. Now for both types of the recipe, you're just going to put some flour on a plate and then dredge the protein in the flour and shake off the excess. So you want to make sure it's pretty evenly coated. This is going to help it become more golden and crispy, but not so that it has too much flour. So repeat that with all the pieces and then set them aside. And now we'll work on our piccata. So traditionally, piccata uses a mixture of butter and olive oil. So I'm using vegan butter here to just easily make it plant-based. The butter adds a lot of flavor, but you can't fry in all butter or it burns too easily. Mine does get a little foamy, but it's because my pan is small. So if you use a larger pan, you can avoid this issue. Just pro tip, because you're gonna see it get a little foamy. But basically you want to warm the butter in the oil, and then you're going to add your dredged protein pieces to the pan and cook for 2 to 3 minutes on each side, and then you can flip it. I was having a tough time flipping these today, but tongs typically works the best. So yeah, just cook for 2 to 3 minutes on each side till it's nice and golden, and then you can transfer them to a paper towel lined plate. And then again, we're going to use the leftover fat that's left in the pan to make our sauce. So start by adding some finely chopped shallots for the base of our sauce, and then we're going to go ahead and add in some garlic. And I actually like to add in the capers early. They're typically added later, but I like to pan fry them because it infuses the oil with more flavor, and fried capers just taste so amazing. So once that's all nice and fragrant, you're going to deglaze the pan with some vegan chicken broth. You can also use garlic broth or vegetable broth, and then bring that to a simmer. And then we're going to add in an arrowroot starch slurry. So you basically just dissolve the arrowroot starch in water and add that to the pan. And as you can see, it will thicken the sauce once it starts to warm to become nice and glossy. So then for this last step here, you want to have the heat on low. You're going to add a little bit more butter, some lemon juice, and some lemon wedges. And you just want to stir this until the butter completely melts into the sauce, and it kind of makes it become more opaque and creamy. You don't want to heat this too much because the lemon wedges can be bitter. So it's just to bring it to a warm temperature, but don't overheat it because then the lemon flavor gets weird. And if you're concerned about that, you can also just leave the lemon wedges out, but I just think they add a nice presentation. So then once the butter is melted, you can go ahead and briefly add your pan-fried protein back into the pan, whether you use the vegan chicken or the tofu. Top it with parsley and then serve. This recipe makes extra sauce, and I typically like to serve my piccata with noodles like I did here. Just cook your pasta separately and you can top it with that extra sauce and then serve your vegan piccata on top. This is so delicious. It's like light but creamy and cozy at the same time. My mother-in-law loves to make this dish, so I'm glad I can make a vegan version as well and still enjoy it. Last but not least, we're going to be making some vegan mushroom risotto, which is so good. And the secret to making this risotto both delicious and creamy but dairy-free is the rosemary garlic cashew cream. If you're in a time crunch on the day of, you could totally make this ahead of time, but the recipe is very, very simple. You're just going to add some soaked cashews and spices. There's fresh rosemary, thyme, salt, and pepper, along with garlic, nutritional yeast, and lemon juice for a little bit of cheesy tang. Then just add some water to thin it out a bit, and you get this nice thick cream. It's like thinner than cream cheese, so you could use less water, but it comes out, it's so delicious. You can use this on anything. We're going to be using some of it in the risotto, but it's also great on toast. I also decided to make some roasted mushroom caps with this risotto, which is totally optional. You don't have to include them if you don't want to, but they add some extra mushroom goodness, and they're pretty simple to make. You're just going to whisk some maple syrup and tamari together, and then chop up some larger portobello mushrooms into strips and toss these in the marinade. If you wanted to get really fancy, I guess you can make the mushroom steaks along with the risotto, but that's a lot of work, and these are still delicious as well. So once they're evenly combined, just add them to a greased baking sheet and then separate them a little bit so there's some space between the pieces, and we can go ahead and pop these in the oven while we make our risotto. Okay, now let's actually get started on the risotto. So one key to risotto is not letting it get too cool when you're adding more vegetable broth into it. So the first step is to take your vegetable broth, put it in a pot, and put that on a separate burner and keep it warm the entire time. And this results in a better, creamier overall risotto. So then to start our pot with a risotto, first we're going to toast some nutritional yeast. I like to toast my nutritional yeast to give it more flavor, and it also helps the risotto have a cheesier flavor. So you're just going to toast that for about 60 seconds and then set it aside on a separate plate and return it to the pan. And I do have notes on how to make this oil-free on my blog if you wanted to keep it oil-free, but I decided to add more flavor this time. So I'm adding some olive oil to the pan, and instead of frying my shallot in water, we're frying it in the oil to give it more flavor. So once the shallot is translucent, you can go ahead and add in some thyme and then the finely chopped cremini mushrooms. You could also use a mushroom blend if you want, but today I just used all cremini mushrooms. We're also going to add in that toasted nutritional yeast that we toasted at the beginning of this segment of the recipe video to add in more flavor, and we're going to cook this down until the mushrooms become shrunken and darker in color, because we don't want the risotto to end up being like too soggy. We're adding the vegetable broth, so we want to get some of that moisture out first. Then we'll add in our risotto rice. You really do need to use arborio rice for this recipe. It doesn't work the same with like the standard jasmine or basmati rice you get at the store. Arborio rice absorbs rice differently. You can find it at most grocery stores though, but if not, you can purchase it online. There's a link on my blog. So you're going to saute the arborio rice for a little bit just to enhance some of its flavor, and then we're going to deglaze the pan with a dry white wine and cook this down until most of the water has absorbed. If you don't want to cook with alcohol, you could just start using the vegetable broth like I will in the next step, but I recommend the white wine. It adds a lot of depth of flavor. So now we're going to start the process of making risotto. So you're going to take some of that warmed vegetable broth and add it to your pan, give it a good stir, and it should come to a simmer rather quickly if you're keeping your vegetable broth at a warm temperature. The key to risotto is adding a little bit of broth at a time. So when you drag your spoon through the risotto, you want to see a dry path, and the vegetable broth or liquid in the risotto shouldn't rush back. There should be a slight lag, and that's when you know that you need to add more vegetable broth. You just want to add a little bit at a time and let the rice slowly absorb it. This results in a creamier overall risotto, and you also want to make sure to stir it pretty frequently. So as you can see here, you can see the dry path, and then I'm stirring in more vegetable broth, making sure it's evenly distributed, and then letting the simmer for a few minutes and testing again when I draw another dry path with my spoon, and repeat and repeat and repeat. Unfortunately, risotto is not one of those things where you can just set it and forget it. It is pretty involved, but this would be a good thing to make ahead of time with your date, or you can all just hang out in the kitchen and have a nice chat while you're making it, because it's not too skill intensive, it's just more time intensive. So you want to start testing your risotto for doneness at around 13 minutes or so, and then continue to add vegetable broth. The rice will have a slightly al dente texture, but it should look something like this once you're finished making it. Well, I will say not quite finished because we still have to make it creamy. Typically at this point you would add in some Parmesan cheese, but if you can recall, we made that vegan rosemary garlic cashew cream, so we're going to add that in instead, and this makes the risotto super creamy and luxurious. And we've got the nice texture of risotto. When you drag your spoon through it, it just sort of roll back when it's done like a wave, which is called l'onda in Italian. I have horrible pronunciation, but that's what you're looking for when the risotto is finished. So now it's time to plate. Risotto is pretty filling, so you can serve as little or as much as you want. And then you can top it off with your roasted mushroom pieces, or you could also, again, make some tofu or tempeh to have on the side with this. But either way, the risotto is creamy, cozy, and totally delicious. If you love mushrooms, I guarantee you're gonna love that. All right, friends, and there you have it. Leave a comment down below and let me know which one of these recipes you want to try first. Whether you want to make these for a date night or just a fancy dinner with friends, or if you're just feeling a little classy on the weeknight and want to treat yourself, I think they're all delicious and they're made from pretty accessible ingredients too. You should be able to find all of the ingredients except for maybe the risotto rice at your grocery store. But I did find my risotto rice in my grocery store, so you might be all set too. If you guys have any other date night recipe suggestions that you'd like to see from me, leave a comment down below and I'd be happy to veganize that for you as well. And if you want even more inspiration for plant-based recipes, make sure you're following me on Instagram and TikTok. I post all the time on there. And you can also check out my blog because I have a handy dandy search bar that can show you a ton of other vegan recipes that are sure to satisfy as well. I hope you all are having a great day, taking care of yourself, drinking some water, and yeah, I look forward to virtually seeing you soon. Bye!